is problematic. You consider them your enemy. In other words, you feel negative towards them. That's why they're your enemy. So in other words, an example of this is you and two friends are somewhere and somebody comes up and says something, and the three of you react in different ways. One of you thinks it's funny. You maybe get very, very angry, and maybe the third person is totally indifferent, like they couldn't care less. Like it was like a non-event for them. And so one person thinks that the person who came up was kind of a comic person and sort of, fun to be around. Then you think of them as a threat, and the other person has forgotten about it already. It's a neutral person from their point of view. This is his point, that if you work with patience, he says, it's a question of calming the aggressive mind. And then the world is a friendlier place. So, do you buy this? That there will be less people coming up and mugging you on the street or breaking into your house or whatever it is that frightens you and causes you to feel nervous about modern society and the threats. Do you really believe that there would be less of that if you worked with your mind? Shantideva says, yes, there would be. There would be. Because your sense of needing, for instance, to be in a walled community with a gate only will increase the sense that there's scary stuff out there that we need to stay away from, and it will just get more scary. So what's the definition of scary? And it has to do with your state of mind. This is what he's saying. And really, whether you buy this or not, really think about it. My hope is whether you think this is absurd or whether you think it's true is really irrelevant if somehow it's challenging you to really think about this, if it's a seed that's being planted. So he says in verse 14, you can never turn aside the outer course of things, no matter how much you try. But you work with your mind, there's like something magical in terms of how the outer seems to change if you work with your mind. Of course, it isn't fast. It isn't like, okay, I want to get rid of all the threats, therefore I'm going to start meditating. And you say, I've been doing it a year and there's still a lot of threats, I give up. I always say to people, these kind of teachings, you give it a minimum of 10 years of really working with it. Because your habits of aggression, for instance, aggressive mind, has been strengthened for so long, it's not going to quickly go. But if your full-hearted commitment is to working with it, then something really begins to change, and it's quite profound. So in verse 13, this is a good one to memorize. In working with this text, it's recommended to memorize the verses, and some of them, the ones that strike you. And this is a famous one that people often memorize. So the image is this. You're walking around the world, you're walking through your days without any shoes on. And you're walking over hot pavement, you're walking over sharp stones, you're walking through thorns, and basically your feet are a mess. They are getting a little stronger as a result, but they are bleeding and cut and they are in bad shape and they hurt all the time. So you think, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. I am going to cover everywhere I walk with leather, and then no problem. So this is his analogy to what we usually do. We try to get rid of that. We get rid of all the threats, and then I won't have a problem anymore. Can you see that if you are thinking that way, then the sense of fear is just being escalated? So he's saying the usual way of thinking, this kind of what we call ordinary, commonplace thinking, or what do you call common sense, is you take care of them. You cover the earth with leather. He uses an example to show how absurd it is. And he says, there's no way that you could ever cover the whole earth with leather. You could cover maybe your front yard. Maybe even if you really worked hard on it, you could cover the city of Boulder with leather. But you know, better not travel too far. You know, better maybe just stay in your house with the door closed and, you know, have a lot of leather all over your floors, and then you'll be safe. And that's kind of how it begins to work. So he says, just put on some shoes, honey. And then you can go anywhere. Wrap some leather around your feet, which is the analogy of work with your mind, and then that's how the problem is solved. So this is a great verse, and that's basically what he's saying. And in terms of this paramita of patience, which is considered to be the antidote to aggression, my favorite description of this kind of patience, which transforms you at the core. It's not just grinning and bearing it, or being a good person and counting to 10. My definition is learning to relax with the edginess of your own energy. So someone comes up and you feel the anger rising. I talked last night about not escalating it. Instead, you stay and you relax. You learn in your life how to relax into the edginess of that energy without feeling that it needs some resolution in the sense of negative words, negative actions, or negative mind proliferating. So again, he's saying the same thing with each of these things. Work with your mind and you'll be surprised how it changes the outer world. Could you imagine if everybody actually on the planet was making some gesture in this direction of taming our minds? What a difference it would make to the planet. Not escalating things, but staying present with whatever comes up and just being there with that. Okay, so the next one, 15, is the paramita of enthusiasm. And the emphasis in this particular one is, I don't quite actually understand the connection between this and enthusiasm. But what he's saying in this verse 15 is, when you have a clear intention, such as I've been discussing this morning about the power of intention. When you have a clear intention, which is the same thing, really what he's saying here is clear concentration, a very steady mind. He's saying here that according to the Hindu religion, that kind of concentrated, steady mind can give you what he calls here as birth in lofty Brahman's realm, which is the same thing as saying born in some kind of pure realm situation, like a fruition view of the Hindu belief, according to Shantideva. And he's saying, so mind has that kind of power, and outer acts of doing things or saying things actually don't have the power of mind, because the intention is really the key thing. So in other words, when you act, as I'm saying, if the act is the act of generosity, if the intention is to give, if the act is the act of generosity, if the intention is to give of yourself, rather than to just live up to a code of moral ethics, that's what really makes the difference. That's what really makes the difference. So he's saying just empty acts or conventionally ethical acts of speech and conduct really never have the power without this clear-minded intention. And what he's saying here is, the implication is that actually taming the mind has even greater results than birth in lofty Brahman's realm, because it has the result to eliminate suffering at the core. It has the result that you don't have to go to a transcendent realm. Right here, where you are, your breakfast table, your job, your family, wherever you are, that is what you are open to. Your mind and heart are open to that. And that openness transforms you at the core. And that's what he's saying here, that taming the mind has even greater results than just steadiness or concentration itself. So read verse 15 and then go on to 16.
A clear intent can fructify and bring us birth in lofty Brahma's realm. The acts of body and of speech are less. They do not generate a like result. Recitations and austerities, long though they may prove to be, if practiced with distracted mind, are futile, so the knower of the truth has said.
So verse 15 is about this whole question of intention, and really the main point there is that mind is the key, that actions and words without the clear intention of what it is you're doing don't really transform you at the core. And verse 16, anybody who's a meditator knows this, is that you can spend, basically this is the paramita of meditation, and what he's saying is You can spend your whole life meditating or performing austerities or doing chanting or whatever. And if you're doing it all with a distracted mind, you might as well be surfing. Because it's just not going to add up. You might think, I'm going to get myself in the position, I'm going to buy the nice meditation outfit and the nice, matching zafu and zabatan, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look like the pictures. And you might think that that's it, but basically you're sitting there thinking about what's for lunch, the man or woman that you just saw before you came in and how you might get together with them, or how you said you didn't like the way the conversation worked out last night, so you're running it over in your mind so you could get it right this time. In other words, we spend a lot of time meditating where our body is here and our mind isn't. So from my point of view, or from his point of view, of course the mind will be distracted. That's what we notice, the wildness of our mind when we sit. But he's saying, if you just sit there and complacently just let it be distracted and aren't actually training and gently following the instructions of noticing, having this amazing capacity to notice that it's gone off and then just gently bring it back, then it's never going to add up to changing you at the core. It's just another empty act of meditating, because it's cool thing to do these days or something like that. Okay, so the point of all of these is working with the mind. Now 17, read 17, it's the last of the paramitas. It's the paramita of prajna or wisdom. Some of you may have heard of the Prajñapāramitā. You may know the Heart Sutra. This is what's being referred to here, the 6th paramita in verse 17. Okay?
All who fail to know and penetrate the secret of the mind, the Dharma's peak, although they wish for joy and sorrow's end, will wander uselessly in misery.
So really what he's saying here is like a fruition statement of working with the mind. The secret of the mind that's referred to here, which is also called the Dharma's peak, what it actually is in traditional language would be a mind that has a direct experience of emptiness or a direct experience of shunyata. But what that means is an experience of openness of our mind. Our mind without bias, without the temporary passing phenomena of bias, without the temporary passing phenomena of kleshas, our mind free of all of that. The perception of that mind, an open mind perceives an open world. A compassionate mind perceives a compassionate world. So he's saying with the Prajñapāramitā that with an unfixated mind, a mind that is not enslaved by, righteous indignation, for instance, or prejudices or biases or harshness. He says this is really the essence of being able to connect with our birthright, with the true nature of our mind. And so underlying all the paramitas is going in this direction of freshness, fresh take. Now my favorite description of this is somebody asked Trungpa Rinpoche what was the definition of enlightenment. And Trungpa Rinpoche paused and then he said, well, I think enlightenment is like smelling tobacco for the very first time. His description of enlightenment was a fresh take, an non-conceptual smelling. Tobacco is a great image actually because we have so much hysteria around. And like right now if someone lit up, I'd freak out, I don't know about the rest of you, but... And so actually, it's interesting. He said smelling tobacco or hearing a bugle for the very first time. But what he's talking about is every moment is unique. And every moment, in that sense, is completely precious. And if you think about it, this moment right now, that's already passed since I began that sentence, is never, ever going to happen exactly like that again. Even this very kind of long period of time of of me walking in, sitting here, giving the teachings, and leaving. This is the only time it's ever going to happen. Even if we tried to all do it again, all of us came, all of us sat here, it's never going to be the same again. Enlightenment is like knowing that, non-conceptually being in that place of the preciousness and uniqueness of every moment. That's the essence of the Prajñapāramitā. And that's what he's saying is that way of living, that way of experiencing your world is your birthright. We could live like that, with that kind of preciousness. And we don't. So that's what he's urging us to do.